Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about robot taxis.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, are they like just a futuristic fantasy, or are they actually like already here on the streets?
Right.
And we're going to be looking at this really interesting discussion from Global Money Talk on YouTube about the Tesla Cybercab reveal and
Yeah.
what it might mean for the whole industry.
It's an interesting one for sure. And it's stirred up a lot of discussion.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, the big question is this thing for real? Or is it just hype?
Yeah, is it actually going to hit the roads?
And how does it compare to some of the other companies that are already kind of quietly out there doing their thing, like a Waymo or a Baidu?
Yeah, and speaking of the Cybercab, it definitely looks like something out of like a sci-fi movie.
Oh, sure.
It's got that sleek, opaque design and those crazy wing doors. I mean,
Yeah, you almost expect to see Elon Musk stepping out of it in a spacesuit.
I know, right? But the thing is, it's only a two-seater,
Yeah.
which is kind of strange. I mean, is that really practical for a taxi service?
Right. It has people talking,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, some are saying that it's too limited, for an actual taxi service.
Right.
But others are thinking, maybe it could be used for other things like a mobile office
Right.
or a luxury shuttle, maybe even a little like a mini hotel room on wheels.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you're going to be stuck in traffic, why not be comfortable?
Yeah. I mean, I gotta admit, I kind of like the idea of taking a nap on my way to work.
Uh-huh.
But let's be real for a second. The whole robot taxi thing has been like full of big promises and even bigger disappointments.
Yeah.
I mean, remember back in 2020 when everybody was like, this is going to be the year of the robotaxi.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of those predictions kind of flopped.
They did, yeah.
And some companies were even like accused of, I don't know, maybe not being totally honest, shall we say?
Yeah, there were definitely some bumps in the road.
For sure.
I think 2020 was a bit of a reality check for the industry.
Yeah.
Some companies went under valuations, plummeted investors, got spooked.
Makes sense.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom.
Okay.
While those headlines were screaming about failures, there were actually some companies out there
Right.
who were quietly making progress.
Interesting.
Proving that the whole robotaxi dream wasn't dead, just maybe evolving a little bit.
Okay, so that brings us to Waymo.
Right.
They might not have that same, like, Tesla pizzazz.
Right.
But they've been quietly building an actual service.
Yeah.
They're racking up millions of miles in cities like Phoenix and San Francisco.
I've heard that.
And get this, people are actually choosing Waymo over Uber.
It's true, and they've really moved beyond the testing phase at this point.
Wow.
They're offering a real fully operational robotaxi service.
That's impressive.
And especially in Phoenix, it's become so normal
Really?
that people just see it as another way to get around.
Wow.
Like if you need a ride home from a bar at like 2 a.m.,
Right.
no problem. Just hail a Waymo.
That's wild.
It's almost like boringly reliable,
Okay.
which in the world of autonomous driving is actually a huge compliment.
I guess that's true. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
Like Tesla's busy grabbing headlines with these futuristic designs, and Waymo's out there just quietly winning the race.
Right.
With their, let's be honest, not so glamorous vehicles.
Yeah.
But they're the ones with the paying customers, so
Right.
it makes you wonder who's really ahead.
It's a classic tortoise and hare situation.
It really is.
And while the U.S. has been going through this hype cycle,
Yeah.
over in China, they've been doing things a bit differently.
Okay.
They've been focusing on gathering tons of real-world data and making changes really quickly.
Interesting.
And they've even got this term for it, level 2.999999.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Which is basically like packing in as many features of level 3 autonomy as possible
Right.
without like crossing any regulatory lines.
Clever.
It is pretty clever.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, let's push the boundaries without getting bogged down in all the bureaucracy.
I like that.
And it seems to be working.
Yeah.
You got companies like Baidu running successful robo-taxi services
Huh.
in cities like Wuhan.
Okay.
And the Chinese government is really using these vehicles to try and change public protection.
Makes sense.
Like imagine seeing robo-taxis everywhere in your city.
Right.
You'd probably start thinking, hey, maybe this self-driving thing isn't so crazy after all.
Yeah. I could see that.
It's a really fascinating example of how government support and a data-driven approach can help accelerate the development of a new technology.
It really is.
But it's not just China that's making waves.
Oh.
Let's look at South Korea. They're doing some really interesting stuff, especially when it comes to level 4 autonomy, which is a whole other ballgame.
And speaking of South Korea, I actually got to ride in a bunch of different autonomous taxis when I was in Seoul.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
How was that?
Every company seemed to have its own, like, driving style.
Interesting.
Some were super smooth, while others were a little bit, let's just say, more adventurous.
Uh-huh.
And that it really made me appreciate, like, the nuances of good self-driving software.
It's easy to forget that we're not just talking about cars here.
Yeah.
We're talking about really complex AI systems
Yeah.
that are learning and evolving all the time.
Right.
And every company has its own algorithms and its own approach to like perception and decision making.
That makes sense.
It's what makes it so fascinating. We're seeing the birth of a whole new kind of intelligence, and it's expressing itself in these subtle differences in driving behavior.
It's kind of like each car has its own personality. Like some are cautious, some are bold, some are just plain weird.
Uh-huh.
But there was this one company, Sonnet, that really impressed me.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They were getting really good results with their autonomous driving,
Yeah,
but they were doing it with cheaper hardware,
that's interesting.
which is a total game changer.
It is, because it challenges that idea that you need all of this top-of-the-line expensive technology to make autonomous driving work.
Right.
They're coming up with creative solutions and using clever software and algorithms to basically make up for the fact that their hardware isn't as fancy.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. And it could make this technology a lot more affordable and accessible in the future.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And get this, they're not even just focused on cars.
Really?
They're working on indoor autonomous driving.
Wow.
Imagine like your car parking itself in the garage.
No more squeezing into tight spots.
Exactly. That's the future I want.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that all of this technology has so many potential applications beyond just taxis.
Right.
We're talking about like a complete transformation of the entire transportation landscape, from our own personal vehicles to public transit to logistics.
Wow.
It's not just about self-driving cars, it's about rethinking how we move people and goods in a way that's more efficient and sustainable and hopefully more enjoyable.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about Tesla's, Cybercab Waymo's dominance, China's data-driven approach, and South Korea's innovations, but with all this focus on specific companies and technology, let's zoom out for a second and ask the big question.
Yeah,
Can this technology actually, like, revolutionize transportation, or is it all just hype?
that is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And to answer that, we need to look beyond the shiny prototypes and the bold promises
Right.
and really dig into the challenges and opportunities that are out there.
Okay.
So buckle up, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some of the hurdles that robot taxis still need to overcome and the potential impact they could have on all of our lives.
Sounds good. I'm ready for part 2. Okay, so we know that robot taxis aren't just some, like, futuristic fantasy. They're actually out there picking up passengers, navigating traffic, and, quietly changing the way we think about transportation.
Right.
But we also hinted that there are some pretty big obstacles in the way of them becoming, like, really widespread.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've talked about the technology itself.
Yeah.
But there's another factor that's absolutely crucial, and that's public perception.
Right, like, will people actually trust a car with no driver?
Exactly. Even if the tech is perfect, are people going to feel comfortable getting in?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we all grow up learning how to drive, trusting our own instincts behind the wheel.
Right.
To just hand that control over to a machine, even one that's supposedly, like, smarter than us.
Yeah,
It feels like a huge leap of faith.
it is a big change.
It kind of reminds me of those sci-fi movies where the robots take over. And
Uh-huh.
there's that little voice in the back of your head saying, like, what if it goes wrong?
Yeah, I get that. It's completely understandable.
Yeah,
We're talking about like a fundamental shift in how we think about transportation.
right.
And change can be scary.
For sure.
That's why companies like Waymo and Baidu are putting so much effort into building trust.
Makes sense.
They're not just putting their cars out there and hoping for the best.
Right.
They're being really open about their testing processes, they're sharing data about their safety records, and they're showing people how the technology works.
It's like they're saying, look, we know you're worried
Right.
and we're taking your concerns seriously.
Yeah.
But even if people do come around to the idea of robot taxis,
Uh-huh.
what about the legal stuff? I imagine there are a ton of, like, regulations and hurdles to jump through.
Oh, absolutely. The legal landscape around autonomous vehicles is still a work in progress.
Okay.
I mean, different countries and even different cities
Right.
have their own rules and regulations.
Yeah.
And it's a real headache for these companies trying to operate on a large scale.
Makes sense.
There are all these liability issues, insurance questions, safety standards.
Right.
It's a lot to figure out.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about navigating this whole legal maze.
Exactly. And that's where governments have a big role to play.
Okay.
They need to create clear frameworks that allow for innovation,
Right.
but also ensure public safety.
Makes sense.
Like, think about it. Who's responsible if a robot taxi gets into an accident?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is it the passenger? The company that made the car?
Right.
The software developer?
It gets complicated.
These are tough questions. that
Yeah.
need answers.
Okay, so let's say we figure all that out.
Okay.
People trust the laws are all sorted out, robot taxis are everywhere.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for us? The average person.
Right. What's the real value here? That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
We're not just talking about replacing human drivers.
Right.
We're talking about a potential paradigm shift in transportation.
Okay.
Imagine traffic as optimized commutes. Our Stress-free parking is no longer a nightmare.
I mean, this sounds pretty good.
Right.
But isn't this all just like a luxury for rich people?
Yeah,
This tech seems pretty expensive right now.
it's true. The initial costs are high.
Yeah.
But that's like any new technology.
Right.
Prices come down as things become more widespread, as production scales up.
Yeah.
And if you think about the hidden costs of owning a car, like insurance, maintenance, fuel, parking,
Yeah.
robot taxis could actually be cheaper in the long run,
Really?
especially for people in cities who are already relying on taxis or ride-hailing services.
So you're saying it might actually be cheaper than owning a car?
It's possible, yeah, especially if you don't drive that often or if you live in a city with good public transport.
Interesting.
And even if you do own a car, think about how convenient it would be to have a robot taxi pick up your kids from school
Oh, yeah.
or run errands for you while you're at work.
That would be amazing.
It could free up so much time and energy.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal, but I have to admit, part of me still loves driving. You know, that feeling of being in control?
Right.
Will robot taxis just turn us all into, like, passive passengers?
That's a good question. I think it depends on your perspective.
Okay.
Some people might see it as a loss of freedom, but others might see it as a liberation.
How so?
Well, imagine all that time you spent driving.
Right.
You could use that time for something else, like reading, working, catching up with friends, or just relaxing.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But even if robot taxis do solve all these problems and then, they have all these benefits, won't there be some, like, unintended consequences?
Of course, with any new technology, there are always ripple effects that we don't anticipate.
Like what?
Well, what happens to all the taxi drivers and truck drivers who lose their jobs?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
How do we make sure that everyone has access to this technology?
Right, it can't just be for rich people.
Exactly. And how do we prevent it from being used for bad things?
Okay, yeah, those are some important questions.
Yeah, these are all valid concerns that we need to think about.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about the bigger social and economic impact.
It is. It's not just a transportation revolution. It's a societal one.
Wow.
And as we move forward, it's really important to have these conversations
Yeah.
to try and anticipate the potential problems and make sure that this technology benefits everyone.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we've talked about public perception, legal hurdles, and the potential benefits, but there's still one big question looming over all of this.
And that is.
Well, how do we actually get from, these small deployments and these little pilot programs
Right.
to a future where robot taxis are, like, everywhere, like just normal taxis?
Right.
What kind of, like, technological breakthroughs do we still need?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? We've made a lot of progress, but there are definitely some key challenges that we still need to solve.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest is what we call edge cases.
Okay.
Those are like those unusual, unpredictable situations that even the beta AI can struggle are.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Yeah, like imagine a sudden snowstorm.
Oh, yeah.
Or a construction zone with like confusing detours.
Right.
Or even like a flock of birds suddenly taking off.
Okay.
These are the kinds of scenarios that can really trip up even the most advanced self-driving systems.
So it's not enough to just teach these cars how to drive on a sunny day with, like, perfect road markings.
Right, exactly.
They need to be able to handle, like, all the weird, messy stuff that happens in real life.
Exactly. And that's going to require a bunch of things.
Okay.
Better sensors, more powerful algorithms, even more data than they're already collecting.
Wow.
We need systems that can not only react to the unexpected, but like anticipate it,
Right.
predict what's going to happen next, and make smart decisions even when they don't have all the information.
It's almost like teaching a computer to think like a human driver, but like a perfect human driver.
Yeah, basically. And that's a really tough challenge.
Yeah, no kidding. It sounds incredibly complex.
It is. It's going to take a whole team of experts just to teach a car how to drive itself.
Wow.
It's a multidisciplinary effort.
Okay.
It's not just engineers and computer scientists.
Right.
You've also got psychologists who understand human behavior,
Okay.
urban planners who can design cities that are better for autonomous vehicles, and even ethicists who can help us figure out all the moral implications.
Wow. It's a whole new world we're stepping into.
It really is.
And speaking of new worlds, what about cybersecurity?
Right.
I mean, if these cars are basically computers on wheels, couldn't someone hack into them?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Right. I've seen enough sci-fi movies to know that could end badly.
It's definitely something we need to be careful about.
Yeah.
As these systems become more connected and rely more on software, the risk of cyber attacks becomes very real.
Okay.
We need to build in strong security measures from the very beginning.
Okay.
Not just to stop hackers from taking control of the cars,
Right.
but also to protect all the data that these systems are collecting.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if someone could get access to the driving history, the location data,
Right.
the personal information of, like, millions of robo-taxi
It's a
users.
scary thought.
It really is, okay, but let's say we do solve all these problems.
Okay.
The tech works perfectly, the laws are clear, everyone loves robot taxis,
Yeah.
and we've got, like, super strong cybersecurity.
Okay.
What does that future look like? Like, paint me a picture.
All right. Close your eyes and imagine this. You wake up in the morning,
Okay.
and instead of dealing with traffic in your own car, you just pull out your phone
Uh-huh.
and you summon a robotaxi.
Okay.
It shows up right on time, takes you to work while you catch up on emails or listen to your favorite podcast.
Nice.
And then it seamlessly connects with the city's public transport system
Wow.
to get you to your next meeting.
That's pretty cool.
And then in the evening, it picks you up from dinner with friends, gets through rush hour without any problems, and takes you home.
Okay.
No stress, no parking hassles. You don't even need to own a car if you don't want to.
That sounds amazing, but what about all the jobs?
Right.
Won't a lot of people be out of work if robots are doing all the driving?
Yeah, it's true that some jobs will be lost, especially in transportation and logistics.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that new technologies often create new jobs, too.
Okay.
We're going to need people to design, build, maintain, and regulate all these systems.
Right.
And then there are all the new industries and services that will pop up around them.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, think about like personalized in-car entertainment, on-demand delivery services,
Oh,
maybe even mobile offices or retail spaces.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's not just about replacing jobs. It's about creating new opportunities
Right.
and changing the economy in ways we can't even imagine yet.
So it's kind of exciting and a little scary at the same time.
It is. We're on the edge of a major shift, but we're not totally sure where it's going to take us.
That's true. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into robot taxis, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to be open-minded.
Okay.
The future of transportation is still being shaped, and robot taxis are just one part of that story.
Uh-huh.
There are going to be some challenges along the way, some unexpected twists and turns.
Yeah,
But the journey is fascinating, and the possibilities are huge.
I agree.
So stay informed and be ready to embrace the ride.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I'm excited to see where this all goes.
Me too.
You know, what the future holds for robot taxis and the world of transportation as a whole. So until next time, keep your minds curious and your imaginations running wild. And who knows, maybe you'll see a driverless car coming down your street soon.
1026.